My parents left me to die alone in ICU while I was in coma. They didn't come back for 8 days. Then they threw a party. I wasn't invited, but I showed up anyway. Not with a weapon, with a visitor logbook. And I read it out loud in front of everyone they loved. My name is Savannah Cole, and I died for 11 minutes on a Tuesday. No one knows that except the doctors and the night janitor who saw my flat line. But here's the part that really matters. When I opened my eyes again, my parents weren't there. They had already left. They had better things to do than watch their only daughter figure out how to breathe on her own. So this is my story. Not for revenge in the way you think. No knives, no poison, no screaming fights. Just a pen, a visitor logbook, and the truth that finally burned them to the ground. I was 17 when the car hit me. A delivery truck ran a red light on a rainy November evening. I was coming home from my part-time job at a diner called the Rusty Spoon, the kind where you wear a paper hat and old men call you sweetheart. I remember the squeal of tires, the flash of headlights, then nothing. The next thing I knew, I was floating above a hospital bed, looking down at a girl with tubes in her mouth and bruises the color of rotten plums. That girl was me. Then I slammed back into my body, and the pain was so loud I couldn't hear the machines beeping. The doctors said I had a traumatic brain injury, a collapsed lung, 2 broken ribs, and a fractured pelvis. They put me in the ICU on the 4th floor of Mercy General Hospital. For the first 3 days, I was in a medically induced coma. That means they put you to sleep so your body can try to fix itself. My mother, Patricia Cole, showed up for exactly 40 minutes on day 1. My father, Richard Cole, showed up for 20. They sat in the waiting room, not even at my bedside. They didn't hold my hand. They didn't talk to the doctors. Then they left a note for the nurses that said, "Call us if she wakes up." They didn't leave a phone number. They left an email address. The nurses were kind. A woman named Loretta held my hand when no one else would. She talked to me even when I was unconscious. She said things like, "You're a fighter, honey. Don't let go. The world needs you." When I finally woke up on day 4, I couldn't speak because of the breathing tube. I could only blink. And the first thing I blinked at was an empty chair. The second thing was a calendar on the wall, November 18, my birthday. I turned 17 alone in a room that smelled like antiseptic and someone else's blood. Loretta came in and saw my eyes open. She cried, real tears. She said, "Welcome back, Savannah. You scared us half to death." I tried to smile, but my face was too swollen from the accident. She held up a whiteboard and a marker. "Can you write?" I took the marker with trembling fingers and wrote in shaky letters. "Where are my parents?" Loretta's face changed. That professional nurse mask slipped over her features. She said, "They've been busy, sweetheart. I'm sure they'll come soon." They didn't come soon. They didn't come that day, or the next, or the day after that. The breathing tube came out on day 6. I could finally talk, but my voice sounded like gravel being crushed under a boot. I asked every nurse, every doctor, every cleaning person who walked in, "Have you seen my parents? Did they call? Did they leave a message?" They all gave me the same look. It was the look people give a stray dog they can't take home. Pity mixed with helplessness. On day 7, a social worker named Mrs. Alvarez came to see me. She was a small woman with glasses on a chain and a voice that never raised above a whisper. She sat on the edge of my bed and said, "Savannah, I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm." I was already calm. When you nearly die, the small things stop scaring you. She said, "Your parents have not been answering our calls. We reached your emergency contact, your Aunt Margaret. She said your parents told her you were fine and that they were taking a break from the drama." A break? From what? From me. I was the one who got straight A's while they slept in. I was the one who worked 40 hours a week at the diner to pay for my own clothes and school supplies because they said they couldn't afford extras. I was the one who cooked dinner every night because my mother was too tired from shopping and my father was too drunk to stand. I was the one who found my father's hidden whiskey bottles in the garage behind the old paint cans and hid them so my mother wouldn't cry. I was the one who made sure the bills got paid when they forgot. And now, they were taking a break from me lying in a hospital bed with a brain that might never work right again. Mrs. Alvarez said, "The hospital is going to assign you a caseworker. We need to talk about where you'll go when you're discharged." I looked at my hands. They were pale and thin, with IV marks like tiny mosquito bites. I said, "Don't I get to go home?" She didn't answer. That was answer enough. But here's the thing about me. I'm not stupid. I'm not weak. And I'm not forgettable. My parents had spent 17 years treating me like an inconvenience, a piece of furniture they didn't ask for. But I had spent 17 years paying attention. I noticed things, I remembered things, and I had a secret weapon that no one in that hospital knew about. I knew where the visitor logbook was. Every ICU has a logbook. It sits at the nurse's station behind the counter. Every single person who comes to visit a patient has to sign it. Name, time, relationship to patient, and sometimes a reason for the visit. It's a security thing, but it's also a record. A cold, hard, unchangeable record of who showed up and who didn't. On day 8, when Loretta went to her break, I pulled out my IV pole and walked. It was only 20 feet from my room to the nurse's station, but my legs were like wet noodles. My ribs screamed with every step. My head pounded like someone was drumming on my skull, but I made it. The logbook was open to the current day. Blue ink, black ink, some signatures in hurried cursive, some in shaky block letters. I flipped back to November 15, the day of the accident. Under my name, Savannah Marie Cole, there were only 3 entries. November 15, 11:47 p.m., Patricia Cole, mother, left at 12:20 a.m. November 16, 8:15 a.m., Richard Cole, father, left at 8:35 a.m. November 16, 9 p.m., Margaret Morrison, aunt, left at 10:30 p.m. That was it. No one else for 6 more days. No friends, no grandparents, no cousins, and certainly no parents. I took a photo with my phone. The hospital had given me back my belongings in a plastic bag marked with my name and room number. My phone was cracked but working. The camera still worked. The photo saved. Then I walked back to my room, climbed into bed, and cried until my chest hurt worse than the broken ribs. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark and thought about every birthday they forgot, every school play they missed, every time I came home to an empty house with a note on the counter that said, "Gone out." Food in fridge. I thought about the time I had appendicitis in 8th grade and they sent me to school anyway because they had a golf tournament. I ended up having emergency surgery alone. A teacher drove me to the hospital. My parents showed up after the surgery was over, smelled like champagne, and told me I was overreacting. I stopped crying around 3 in the morning. The tears just ran out, and in their place, something hard and cold grew. It wasn't hate, it was something worse. It was clarity. I saw my parents for exactly what they were, 2 selfish people who had a child because they thought it would fix their marriage. When it didn't, they just ignored me and hoped I would go away. But I didn't go away. I was still here, and I was done being invisible. On day 9, my parents finally showed up. I was eating applesauce from a plastic cup when the door opened. My mother walked in first. She looked the same as always. Blonde highlights that cost $400, expensive jeans that had never seen a day of real work, a face that had been Botoxed into a permanent expression of mild surprise. My father followed. He had the red nose and watery eyes of a man who had been drinking since breakfast. They both smiled the same fake smile. They both said, "Oh, honey, we're so glad you're okay." I didn't say anything. I just looked at them. My mother rushed to my bedside and tried to hug me, but I flinched so hard I nearly pulled out my IV. She pulled back like I had slapped her. "Savannah, what's wrong? Why are you looking at us like that?" My father stood near the door, arms crossed, leaning against the wall. He said, "She's probably just groggy. It's the drugs they have her on." I set down my applesauce. I spoke slowly, carefully, like I was learning to talk for the first time. I said, "Where were you?" My mother blinked. "What do you mean? We were here. We came as soon as we could." I said, "You came on day 1 for 40 minutes. Dad came for 20, then you didn't come back for 8 days. I was in a coma for 3 of those days. I woke up alone, on my birthday." My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled out of water. My father stepped forward. His voice was hard and sharp. "Don't be dramatic, Savannah. We have jobs, we have lives. You have no idea what we've been through." I laughed. It hurt my ribs. I laughed anyway. I said, "What you've been through? I died, Dad, for 11 minutes. My heart stopped. A doctor pushed on my chest so hard he cracked a rib that wasn't even broken yet. I had a tube down my throat. I couldn't breathe on my own. And you were where? Getting your hair highlighted, drinking whiskey in the garage." Posting photos of yourself at a wine bar? My father's face turned purple. My mother started crying, not real tears, the kind of tears you turn on when you're caught in a lie. My father pointed a finger at me. His hand was shaking. You listen here, young lady. We are your parents. We put a roof over your head. We fed you. We clothed you. We gave you everything. You don't get to talk to us like that, not ever. I looked at his finger. I looked at his red nose. I looked at my mother's perfect hair and her crocodile tears, and I felt something inside me crack, not break, crack. Like a seed cracking open before it grows into something new. I said, "You're right, you are my parents. And I'm going to hold you to that. Every single thing you just said, I'm going to remember." They left 20 minutes later. My mother said she had a spin class. My father said he had a meeting with an important client. They promised to come back the next day. They didn't. And that's when I stopped being their daughter and started becoming something else. Something they never expected. The next week was a blur of physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, and a dozen different doctors poking and prodding me like I was a science experiment. Every day, I asked the nurses the same question. Did my parents call? Did they come? Every day, they shook their heads and looked away. My Aunt Margaret came twice. She brought me a stuffed bear and a bag of hard candies. She held my hand and said, "Your mother has always been selfish, Savannah. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I tried to talk to her." I told her it wasn't her fault. She cried. Those were real tears. I held her hand and felt the first real warmth I had felt in days. On day 14, the hospital told me I was stable enough to be discharged. But there was a problem. A big problem. My parents had not returned any calls from the hospital. They had not signed the discharge papers. They had not arranged for my follow-up appointments, my medications, my physical therapy, or my home care. Mrs. Alvarez came back. She looked tired. She said, "Savannah, we have a situation. Legally, you are a minor. Your parents are your guardians, but they are refusing to communicate with us. They have not answered their phones or emails in 4 days. We may have to get Child Protective Services involved and file a report of medical neglect." I said, "No, don't do that yet. Give me one more day." She looked skeptical, but she agreed. That night, I did something I had never done before. I called my father's boss. I had his number saved from a work party 3 years ago that my mother forced me to attend so she could show off. A man named Mr. Hendricks answered on the second ring. I said, "Mr. Hendricks, this is Savannah Cole, Richard Cole's daughter. I'm in the hospital at Mercy General. I was in a car accident. I almost died. My parents haven't visited me in 2 weeks. They won't sign my discharge papers. I don't know where I'm going to live when I get out. I'm scared. And I thought you should know what kind of man works for you." There was a long silence, so long I thought he had hung up. Then Mr. Hendricks said, "Savannah, I am so sorry. I had no idea. I have 2 daughters of my own. I will handle this. You focus on getting better." The next morning, my father showed up at 7 a.m. He was sober for the first time I could remember. He was pale as a ghost. He signed the discharge papers without looking at me. He didn't say a single word. He drove me home in silence. My mother was waiting in the kitchen. She had made a casserole. She never made casseroles. The house smelled like guilt and burned cheese and something else I couldn't name. I walked through the front door and looked around. The same beige walls, the same dust on the same fake plants, the same heavy silence that had filled my entire childhood. I went upstairs to my room. It was exactly as I had left it 2 weeks ago. My bed was unmade. My homework was still open on my desk. A cup of water from 2 weeks ago had grown a ring of mold. My clothes were still in the hamper. No one had even come in to close the blinds. The sun had faded my favorite poster on the wall. That night, I lay in bed and made a plan. Not a revenge plan, not yet. A survival plan. I had to get better. I had to get strong. I had to become someone who could stand on her own 2 feet without them. And then, when I was ready, I had to make sure my parents never forgot the day they left me alone in the ICU. The next few months were the hardest of my life. I went to physical therapy 3 times a week. My parents drove me, but they sat in the waiting room on their phones. They didn't ask how I was doing. They didn't ask about my headaches or my memory problems or the seizures that were still happening. They treated me like a broken appliance that was being repaired. As soon as I could walk without limping, they stopped driving me. I took the bus in the rain and the snow and the cold. I didn't complain. I didn't ask for help. I also started working again, not at the diner. My brain wasn't fast enough for that yet. The seizures made it hard to remember orders. I found a job at a library called the Fairmont Public Library, reshelving books. It was quiet. It was safe. It was lonely. And it gave me access to something valuable, time alone with information. I started researching my parents. Not their secrets, not yet, their public life, the life they showed to the world. And what I found was very interesting. My father, Richard Cole, was a regional manager for a construction company called Hendricks and Sons. He had been passed over for a promotion 3 times. He drank because he felt like a failure. He blamed everyone else for his problems. My mother, Patricia Cole, was a real estate agent. She sold houses to rich people and posted photos of her perfect life on social media. She had 3,000 followers who thought she was a loving mother and a successful businesswoman. In reality, she had sold only 5 houses in the past year. She drank white wine out of coffee mugs so the neighbors wouldn't see. She told her friends that I was difficult and attention-seeking and going through a phase. I started keeping a journal. Not a diary with feelings and poems. A record. A log. Every time they forgot to pick me up from therapy, I wrote down the date and time. Every time they left me home alone for a weekend while they went to a wine tasting or a golf tournament, I wrote it down. Every time my mother posted a photo of our family game night that never happened, I took a screenshot and saved it. Every time my father came home drunk at 2 in the morning and called me a burden, a mistake, a waste of space, I recorded it on my phone. I didn't do this out of hate. I did it because I needed proof, because I knew that one day I would need to show the world who they really were. The turning point came in March. 6 months after the accident, I was still having seizures. Small ones. The doctors called them focal seizures. My left hand would shake for 30 seconds, and I would lose track of where I was. My vision would blur. The doctors said it was from the brain injury. They said it might go away on its own. They said I needed to avoid stress and get plenty of rest. My parents' response to this was to give me more chores and yell at me more often. One night, my mother came into my room without knocking. She was holding a piece of paper. It was a bill from the hospital. A big one, $80,000 after insurance. She threw it on my bed. She said, "Your father and I have decided that you need to contribute to this. You can pay us back with your library job. $200 a month starting next month." I looked at the bill. Then I looked at my mother. I said, "You left me alone in the ICU for 8 days. You didn't sign my discharge papers. You didn't even call to see if I was alive. And now you want me to pay you back for saving my life?" My mother's face hardened into something ugly. She said, "We didn't leave you alone. We were busy. And don't think we don't know about you calling your father's boss. That was low, Savannah, very low. You embarrassed him in front of the entire company." I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had nothing left to lose. I said, "Low is leaving your 17-year-old daughter to wake up from a coma by herself. Low is telling your friends she's fine when she can't walk to the bathroom without help. Low is pretending to be a good mother on social media while your real daughter is alone in a hospital bed. I haven't even started low yet." My mother left. She slammed the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. The next day, she changed the Wi-Fi password. She said I could have it back when I apologized for ruining my father's reputation. I didn't apologize. I used the library's Wi-Fi instead. I also started using the library's computers to look up laws about child neglect and medical abandonment. April came. I turned 18. My birthday fell on a Thursday. My parents forgot completely. They went out to dinner without me. I saw the selfie my mother posted on social media. Caption, "Date night with my love." They were smiling. They were holding wine glasses. They didn't mention me. They never mentioned me. I didn't remind them. I spent the day at the library, working on my journal and thinking about the future. I had applied to 3 colleges. Community colleges because that's all I could afford. But it was a start. It was a door. I had also applied for a new job, a better job, a receptionist at a law firm called Chen and Associates. The lawyer's name was Margaret Chen. She was a small, fierce woman with short gray hair and glasses and a voice that could cut glass. She specialized in family law. I didn't tell her why I wanted to work for her. I just said I was a hard worker and a fast learner and that I needed a fresh start. She hired me on the spot. She said, "You have sad eyes, Savannah. But you also have a spine. I like that. People with spines don't quit." I started the next week, and that's when things really began to change. Working for Margaret Chen taught me two very important things. First, the law is not about justice. It's about evidence. Justice is just a word. Evidence is real. Second, parents who abandon their children can be held accountable, but only if the child is willing to fight. And I was willing. I was more than willing, I was hungry for it. I started asking Margaret questions. Casually, during lunch, while I was filing papers. What happens if a minor is left alone in the hospital? What if the parents refuse to visit for over a week? What if they refuse to sign discharge papers? What if they leave the state while their child is in a coma? Margaret looked at me over her sandwich one day. Her eyes were sharp. She said, "That's called medical neglect. It's a form of child abuse. In this state, it's a felony. Why do you ask, Savannah?" I said. "No reason, just curious. I'm trying to understand the law." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. But I wasn't curious. I was planning. I was building something. Over the next 2 months, I gathered more evidence. I got a certified copy of the ICU visitor logbook. The hospital gave it to me after I signed a release form and paid a $20 fee. It was the best $20 I ever spent. I also got my complete medical records. Every page, every note. Every time a nurse wrote, "Patient's parents not present," patient expressed distress and asked for them repeatedly. I got the phone records from my parents' cell phones. My father had made 43 calls to a woman named Brittany during the week I was in the ICU. His mistress. My mother had posted 17 photos on social media, including one of her at a wine tasting in Napa Valley. The caption said, "Living my best life." The timestamp was the same day I woke up from my coma. I got a written statement from Mrs. Alvarez, the social worker. She wrote it on hospital letterhead. Savannah Cole was a minor in my care from November 15 to November 29. Her parents were unresponsive for 8 consecutive days. She was left alone with no visitors except her aunt. She expressed fear, confusion, abandonment, and physical distress. In my professional opinion, this constitutes medical neglect. I have worked in this field for 15 years. I have never seen a case this clear. I got a statement from Loretta, the nurse who held my hand. She wrote, "I have worked in the ICU for 22 years. I have seen a lot of things. But I have never seen a child so completely abandoned by her parents. Savannah cried for them every single night for the first week. She asked for them by name. They never came, not once. I will never forget the sound of her crying. I put everything in a 3-ring binder. The binder was black. I labeled it evidence in white marker. Then I waited. I watched. I planned. The opportunity came in July. 8 months after the accident, my parents threw a party. A big one. They invited all their friends, their neighbors, my mother's book club, my father's golf buddies, and my father's boss, Mr. Hendricks. The occasion. My mother had finally sold a $1 million house, her biggest sale ever. She wanted to celebrate. She told me to stay in my room. She said, "Don't come downstairs. Don't embarrass us. Just stay out of sight for one night." "Is that too much to ask?" I said, "Okay." But I didn't mean it. I hadn't meant anything I said to them in months. That night I dressed in a plain black dress. Not too fancy, just respectful, just present. I brushed my hair until it shined. I put on a little lipstick that my Aunt Margaret had given me for my birthday. Then I waited. I sat on my bed and listened to the party grow louder and louder. I could hear the laughter, the clinking of glasses, my mother's fake laugh echoing through the house, my father's booming voice telling the same story he always told. At 8:30 p.m., when the party was at its peak, I walked downstairs. The living room was full of people, 30 or 40 of them. My mother was holding a glass of white wine. My father was telling a story about a difficult client he had put in his place. Everyone was smiling and nodding. Then they saw me. The room went quiet. It happened slowly like a wave. The laughter stopped. The clinking stopped. My mother's smile froze on her face. My father's face turned red. He said, "Savannah, go back upstairs, now." I didn't move. I stood in the middle of the room and looked at all those faces. Some I knew, some I didn't, but they all had one thing in common. They had no idea who I really was. They had no idea what my life had been like. I said, "Hello, everyone. I'm Savannah, Patricia and Richard's daughter. Most of you have never met me, even though I've lived in this house for 18 years. That's because my parents don't like to talk about me. I'm the daughter who almost died. I'm the daughter they left alone in the ICU." My mother tried to interrupt. Her voice was high and panicked. "She's lying. She's mentally unstable. It's the brain injury. She has seizures. She doesn't know what she's saying." I held up my hand. I said, "I have a brain injury because a truck hit me. I was 17 years old. I died for 11 minutes. My heart stopped. When I woke up, my parents weren't there. They didn't come for 8 days. I have proof." I pulled out the black binder. I opened it to the first page, the visitor logbook. I walked around the room, showing it to people. I held it up so everyone could see, then I started reading out loud. November 15, 11:47 p.m. Patricia Cole, mother, left at 12:20 a.m., that is 40 minutes. November 16, 8:15 a.m. Richard Cole, father, left at 8:35 a.m., that is 20 minutes. November 16, 9 p.m. Margaret Morrison, aunt, left at 10:30 p.m., that is an hour and a half. Then nothing, for 8 days, no entries, no names, no visits, no parents. I turned the page, I kept reading. November 18, my birthday, no entry, November 19, no entry, November 20, no entry, November 21, no entry, November 22, no entry, November 23, no entry, 8 days of nothing. 8 days of silence, 8 days of me asking every nurse who walked in, "Have my parents come yet?" And every nurse saying, "Not yet, sweetheart." I flipped to another section. This is my medical record, doctor's notes, nurse's notes. Listen to this one. November 17, 2 a.m., Nurse Loretta writes, "Patient awake, crying, asking for mother, no parent present, patient comforted by staff." Another one. November 19, 10 p.m. Same nurse writes, "Patient expressed fear of being abandoned. Parents have not called or visited. Patient's emotional distress is severe." I turned to the witness statements. This is from Mrs. Alvarez, the hospital social worker. She wrote, and I quote, "Savannah Cole was a minor in my care. Her parents were unresponsive for 8 consecutive days. She was left alone with no visitors except her aunt. She expressed fear, confusion, abandonment, and physical distress. In my professional opinion, this constitutes medical neglect." Then I held up Loretta's letter. My voice cracked, but I kept going. And this is from the nurse who held my hand when no one else would. Nurse Loretta, 22 years in the ICU. She wrote, "I have never seen a child so completely abandoned by her parents. Savannah cried for them every single night for the first week. She asked for them by name. They never came. I will never forget the sound of her crying." My mother was sobbing. My father was staring at the floor. But I wasn't done. I flipped to the phone records. And this is my father's phone log from the week I was in a coma. 43 calls to a woman named Brittany, his mistress. 43 calls, and 0 calls to the hospital. 0 calls to see if his daughter was alive or dead. I turned to the social media screenshots. And this is my mother, posting photos of herself at a wine tasting. Caption, "Living my best life." The timestamp, November 18. My birthday, the day I woke up from my coma, alone. The room was dead silent. Some people were crying. Some people were recording on their phones. Mr. Hendricks had his arms crossed and his face was hard as stone. Then I pulled out the hospital bill, the $80,000 bill my mother had thrown on my bed. I held it up. I looked straight at my mother. And this is the bill they want me to pay, $80,000. For the hospital stay they abandoned me during. For the surgeries they weren't there for. For the ventilator they never saw. For the coma they slept through. I reached into the back of the binder and pulled out one more paper, a letter from Margaret Chen. I read it out loud. This is a statement from my employer, Margaret Chen, attorney at law. She specializes in family law. She wrote, "Savannah Cole was a minor at the time of her hospital stay. Under state law, a minor cannot enter into a binding contract for medical debt. The responsibility for medical bills of a minor child falls entirely upon the parents or legal guardians. Therefore, the $80,000 hospital bill is legally the responsibility of Patricia and Richard Cole, not Savannah." Any attempt to force Savannah to pay this bill is a violation of state law and may constitute financial abuse of a minor. I have advised Savannah not to pay a single penny. The law is on her side, not on her parents' side. I looked up from the letter. I looked at my mother. I looked at my father. I said, "So no, I will not pay your bill. I will not give you $200 a month. I will not apologize for telling the truth. The law says you are responsible for me. You were responsible for me in that hospital bed. You failed. And now everyone knows it." My mother collapsed onto the couch. My father stood frozen. The party was over. I walked to the front door. I had already packed a bag. It was in the hall closet, hidden behind the winter coats. I picked it up and slung it over my shoulder. My mother looked up. Her mascara was running down her face. "Where are you going?" I said. "I'm leaving. I'm 18 now. You don't have to pretend to care anymore. And I don't have to pretend to forgive you." My father said, "You'll come back. You have no money, no car, no place to go. You'll be back by morning." I smiled. That same not nice smile. I said, "I have a job. I have a lawyer. I have a friend from the library who's letting me stay in her guest room. And I have a black binder full of evidence that says you two will never hurt anyone again. Not me, not anyone." I opened the door. The summer air was warm and thick and smelled like cut grass. I stepped outside. My mother called after me. "Savannah, please, we love you. We've always loved you." I paused. I turned back. I looked at her one last time. I looked at my father standing behind her, not saying a word. I said, "Love doesn't leave. Love doesn't forget. Love doesn't choose wine over a ventilator. You don't love me. You never did. You loved the idea of having a daughter. But you never loved me. And that's okay now, because I finally love myself enough to walk away." And I did. I walked down the driveway, down the street, and into the night. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The revenge wasn't in the screaming or the binder or the ruined party. The revenge was in the walking away. The revenge was in the truth. The revenge was in knowing that from that night on, everyone who mattered would know exactly who my parents were. And everyone who mattered would know exactly who I was. But the story doesn't end there, because walking away was just the beginning. The first week on my own was harder than I expected. My friend from the library, a quiet girl named Maria, let me sleep on her couch. Her apartment was small and smelled like candles. She didn't ask questions. She just handed me a blanket and said, "You're safe here." I cried that night. Not sad tears, relief tears. I had never felt safe before. I kept working at the law firm. Margaret Chen noticed I was more focused than ever. She started giving me more responsibility. I filed documents, answered phones, and sometimes sat in on client meetings. I learned more about family law in 3 months than most people learn in 3 years. I also learned something else. Margaret knew. She had known from the beginning. One day, she called me into her office and closed the door. She said, "Savannah, I'm not going to ask you to tell me what happened, but I want you to know that if you ever want to take legal action against your parents, I will help you. Pro bono, free, no charge." I thanked her. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. My parents tried to contact me. At first, it was angry texts and voicemails. "How could you do this to us? You ruined our lives. You're dead to us." Then, after a few weeks, the tone changed. They got scared. They started leaving messages that said, "We're sorry, please come home. We'll do better." I saved every message. I didn't respond. The story spread. Someone at the party had recorded my speech on their phone. They posted it online. Within a week, it had 1 million views. Within a month, it had 5 million. Local news picked it up, then national news. I was interviewed by a reporter named Diane Reyes from a morning show. She asked me why I did it. I said, "Because silence is what allows neglect to continue. I was silent for 17 years. I'm not silent anymore." My parents lost everything. My father was fired from his job. Mr. Hendricks didn't even give him a severance package. My mother's real estate license was suspended pending an investigation. Their friends stopped returning their calls. The country club they belonged to asked them to resign. They had to sell their house. I heard through my Aunt Margaret that they moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. My father's mistress left him. My mother started drinking openly. 6 months after the party, I got a letter. It was from my mother's lawyer. The letter said my mother wanted to apologize in person. She wanted to meet for coffee. She said she had started going to therapy. She said she was sober. She said she missed me. I read the letter 3 times, then I threw it away. Not out of anger, out of peace. I had already forgiven her, not for her sake, for mine. Forgiveness isn't about saying what they did was okay. It's about saying, I'm not carrying this weight anymore. I set the weight down the night I walked out that door. I still have the black binder. It sits on a shelf in my apartment. I don't look at it often. But sometimes, on hard days, I open it to the first page, the visitor logbook, and I remember that I survived, not because of my parents. In spite of them, and that's the best revenge there is. 2 years later, I am 20 years old. I live in a small but cozy apartment with Maria. I work full-time at the law firm and go to community college at night. I'm studying to be a paralegal. Maybe one day, a lawyer. Margaret says I have a gift for the law. She says I see things other people miss. I think she's right. When you grow up invisible, you learn to see everything. I still have seizures sometimes. My left hand still shakes. The doctors say they might never go away completely. But I don't mind. Every time my hand shakes, I remember that I'm alive. Every time I forget a word or lose my place, I remember that I fought to get here. The scars on my body are maps of a war I won. My parents are divorced now. They blame each other for what happened. My father says my mother was too selfish to be a real parent. My mother says my father was too drunk to notice anything. They're both right. They're both wrong. They're both still looking for someone to blame except themselves. I don't think about them much anymore. They're like a book I finished reading. I know how it ends. I don't need to read it again. My Aunt Margaret is my only family now. She calls me every Sunday. She sends me care packages with cookies and socks and notes that say, I'm proud of you. I cry every time, happy tears. She is the one who came to the hospital. She is the one who held my hand. She is the one who believed me. She is the family I chose. Last week, I visited the ICU at Mercy General. I walked past the nurse's station and saw the logbook. It was a new one. The old one was probably in storage somewhere. I went to see Loretta. She's still working the night shift. She saw me and started crying. She hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would break again. She said, I knew you would make it, Savannah. I knew it. I thanked her for holding my hand when no one else would. She said, that's what nurses do. We hold hands, we don't let go. I think about that sometimes. Loretta didn't let go. My Aunt Margaret didn't let go. Maria didn't let go. The people who mattered held on. My parents let go. And that's the difference. Love holds on. Love shows up. Love sits in the hard places and doesn't run away. So this is my message to anyone who is listening. If you are lying in a hospital bed right now, alone and scared, please know this. You are not invisible. You are not a burden. You are not too much. The people who leave you are the broken ones. Not you. You are the one who stays. You are the one who fights. You are the one who gets up and walks out and builds a new life from the ashes of the old one. My name is Savannah Cole. I died for 11 minutes on a Tuesday, but I came back, and I'm not going anywhere.